Welcome back, dear students. It's good to have you guys back, and today we are going to look at Plato. We're going to look at his political philosophy. You see, Plato is one of the most important figures in philosophy and also in political philosophy. But I think everybody knows one of his great works is, one of his great works is the Republic, right? Which we will look at in the coming videos. However, today we're going to start with one of his dialogues, right? And the dialogue which we're going to look at is Plato's Meno. You see, you may wonder as to why we are starting with Meno and not with the Republic, because after all, you may ask, we are looking at classical political philosophy, and then you may think, because it is political philosophy, we must look at the Republic first. However, I would disagree, and maybe it's wrong for me. I suppose it's imprudent of me to maybe start off this lecture on Plato with Meno. However, you will realize, and we will see later on as the conversation goes on, as the video goes on, you will come to realize that Meno is a good point of entrance to understanding Plato. It is of my belief, and I believe so, that Plato's Meno provide a good understanding about his whole political philosophy, and it becomes much more easier for the listener and for the students to better understand this very complicated, it's not complicated, but it's very, very difficult philosopher. You see, I say difficult not because he's difficult, but then I say difficult because most people today have an attention span of zero, like literally zero, like they have no literal attention span. And that's what makes Plato and other classical thinkers such as Socrates and also such as Aristotle are difficult philosophers, including Plato. The reason why I say this is difficult is because you see, there are things that we can't take things in face value, right? Nowadays, much of the writings in political philosophy, or be it in political theory, or in any subjects in humanities or in social sciences, everything is very straightforward, right? You can literally read those work in a literal sense. However, when it comes to great thinkers and philosophers such as Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, it is very difficult to take them in a literal sense, because what they say may not necessarily be what they want you to believe, or maybe it may look something else in the face value. But however, if you examine it closer, if you delve in those issues more deeper, then maybe you get a better understanding, an understanding which is different from what is being stated outwardly in the face value. That's why it is difficult. But however, I'm here to guide you through, so nothing is difficult, right? Okay, so we're going to start with Meno, and the reason why I opted to start Plato with this dialogue called Meno is precisely because Meno, the whole dialogue revolves around the issues of virtue, right? Of virtue. Now, before we get into that, what virtue is, I want to make certain things clear, right? I want to give you guys a certain contextual background so that we are well grounded in the ideas of these ancient Greek philosophers. You see, it is very interesting to know and to realize, and also to give you some sort of contextual idea, is that, you see, what we now think of the state and the society, right? Nowadays we tend to differentiate, especially in political theory and the present political philosophy. We tend to differentiate between what we know as the state and what we know as the society. and we see them in a very different light. We see the state as an entity of itself, and we also see society as an entity, a part of the state, right? Apart, right? Not apart, but in apart, different from the state. We see state and society to be different from each other. We don't see them, we don't take them to be the same. However, for these classical thinkers, especially for Socrates, for Plato, and for Aristotle, we have to understand and we must accept and realize that for them, they were living in times and they were talking about an entity, a society, which is not separated from the state. In other words, for Aristotle, for Plato, and for Socrates, the state and the society is the one and the same. They were not, you cannot differentiate them, right? They were more or less the same thing. Whenever you say you're talking about the state, you are talking about the society. Whenever you are talking about society, you are talking about the state. Because you see, the very Greek term for what we know as polis, right? The Greek term for polis, or like the city-state, it is something much more than the city-state, right? Nowadays, a very, I would say, very wrong definition that we have here about elsewhere in the right, especially here in India and especially here in Nagaland, is that we tend to think that polis means city-state. No, that is not it. The city-state is just, maybe you can say that the city-state is just a misnomer, is a misunderstanding. However, actually in reality, the Greek term city-state literally means the polis, right? That means everything. It is not just the city-state, it is everything. It is not just the state and society, rather the polis, right? The city-state, the community, right? The society is itself, it is a religion. It is a society, it is a community. Moreover, it is part of oneself, right? It is very, very sacred. It is very, very sacred, right? You cannot separate yourself apart from the polis, right? Apart from the city-state, apart from the state, apart from the society. You cannot remove yourself from it because you are part of it, right? And moreover, this polis or this city-state is a moral entity, right? Now, I cannot emphasize this enough, and I want you to remember this clearly, right? No matter what happens, you must understand this at the back of your head and remind yourself that when we talk of Socrates, when we talk of Plato, and when we talk of Aristotle, the reason why you will find, and you have found in the lectures with regards to Socrates, and now you will realize in lectures regarding Plato and also with regards to Aristotle, you will realize that these three thinkers, the pioneer thinkers in political philosophy and philosophy in general, maybe political philosophy, there is this central theme, right? There is this one central theme that revolves around the whole philosophy, or that revolves around their philosophy, and that is the issue of virtue, ethics. These things these words such as virtues and ethics will keep cropping up when we deal with Socrates, and we saw that, and we will see when we talk of Plato's philosophy. You will see that, and later on when we speak of Aristotle, these terms or these concepts of virtue and ethics, they keep cropping up, and there's a reason why they keep cropping up, because when you speak of politics, when you speak of the city-state, when you speak of the polis, when you speak of the society, for the ancient Greeks, especially for Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, for them, they saw this state, this society, this community as a moral entity. It is a moral entity. It is a moral institution, right? The state, the society, the community is a moral entity, right? Not only that, it is very, very sacred, right? When we say it's very, very sacred, it means it has this something, what we in today's term we can speak of, we can see it as from a religious point of view. In other words, for them, the city-state, for instance, Athens is not only a city-state, it is not only a state, it is not only a society, it is not only a community, but it is also a religion. Right? It is also a religion, which is more, and of course, when we say something is religious, something is sacred, we do assume that it is a moral entity. We have some moral assumption about it. So we must realize that when these thinkers, especially the Greek thinkers, when they speak of politics, when they speak of society and the state, and everything about politics in itself, they see it as a moral entity. That's why the issues of ethics, the issues of virtue becomes essential, such as the issues of justice, as we will see later on in Plato's dialogue. The issues of justice and virtue and ethics, they become the central theme in the ideas and philosophies of these great Greek thinkers. We must also understand that during their time, right? During the time of Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, we must also realize and accept that they were living in times where they had no notion, no concept, such as state. I hope you're getting this. And then I want you to pay special attention to this. You see, they were living in times where they had no concept such as the state. Right? They were beyond that. They were not living for them, because they were living in times where everything, the state and society, is the same. Religion, the state is just like Athens or Sparta, right? Or Thessaly. They were all not only a state, but also society, also a religion, right? And also it is you saw yourself as part. You were part and parcel of the city-state. If you were an Athenian, then for you, defining who you are inevitably must fall back on you as an Athenian, or as an Spartan, or as a Thessaly, right? So those city-states in which you live were part of you, of your whole being, right? You were Athens, you are Sparta, you are Thessaly, right? You are Corinth, right? So all these things. So to understand where we are, and to truly understand the ideas, and also truly understand the whole basis of politics, the whole basis of political philosophy, is that we must at first of all realize this. I know this is quite a long introduction, but it is an essential and very important introduction nevertheless, and you must keep this in mind, or else you will not fully appreciate nor fully understand as to why we have to deal with, as to why should we even bother about the governance of our society, about the governance of a state, about the character and idiosyncrasies of those who govern a society, right? It is very, very essential. So here we are. We must know this, because when we speak of virtues and ethics and whatnot, you see, the reason why, and like I said, because for them, these Greek thinkers, for them, because they're so inevitably so the community, their state, their society, Athens, Sparta, whatnot, to be a moral entity, hence the issue of virtue becomes all the more essential. And the reason why is that because when we speak of, say in Greek words, in Greek terms, polis, right? When we speak of polis for a Greek, when you speak of a city-state, when you speak of Athens, when you speak of Sparta, for instance, it is inevitably linked to the perfection of man, right? Perfection of man, perfection of soul. Why? Because you saw Athens, you saw Sparta, you saw Thessaloniki, you saw Sicily as a moral entity, right? Today we take this for granted, do we not? Right? Today, when you speak of, say, for instance, let us not be too ambitious. Let us just reduce ourselves and limit ourselves to our own tiny little state over here in Nagaland, or in Assam, or in Manipur, or wherever it is. Right? Whenever you speak of Manipur, or Assam, or Nagaland, or Arunachal, you don't see yourself as part. You see it as a state of Nagaland, as a state of Andhra Pradesh, or on a state of Assam, or whatnot. You don't see. Today we make this distinction between the state and the society. Right? We make this different distinction between the two. However, for Plato, for Socrates, for Aristotle, they are the one. They are one. The state and society are one. Not only is it one, but also you are part of it. It is your existence, it is you inhabiting in Athens, for instance, or Sparta, for instance, that makes Sparta Sparta, that makes Athens Athens, right? And hence, in order to truly understand the purpose behind politics, for instance, let us just limit to politics, is that you must understand the works of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates in this context, or else you will not understand what they are. You will have a very superficial understanding of what they mean, right? You see, because when we speak of philosophy, or when we speak of political thought, we can never underestimate the importance of context. It is the context that clarifies the ideas. That clarifies a lot. Later on, you will realize, and as we will read the Republic, you will realize that what many people think Plato had advocated in the Republic, such as the philosopher king and whatnot, you will come to realize that is that truly what Plato favored, right? Is that what truly because nowadays, if you read the textbooks, so many textbooks, especially by Indian authors who has very, very little understanding of these Greek thinkers, and which you are expected to read, which is kind of ridiculous because you are getting all the wrong information. However, many books nowadays say that Plato advocated and advanced the idea of philosopher king. Yeah. And the kind of society and the kind of society it required to have such kind of philosopher king to rule over the society. However, you will come to realize that is that truly what Plato truly advocated for? Did he truly believe in it? You see, and maybe as we read the Republic later on, you'll come to realize that that's not necessarily the case. We might have most people who have ever studied Socrates, or who have ever studied Plato, still holds a very wrong idea about what Plato was propagating or advocating for in the Republic, and that we will leave it here, but then later on, as we read the Republic, you will realize what that means. Okay, so moving on to Meno. You see, in Meno, right? In Plato's dialogue, Meno, here's a character called Meno, right? And he is in conversation or dialogue with Socrates. And remember, Plato almost exclusively, whenever he wrote any sort of work, he in almost all of his works, he used Socrates, right? He used the character of Socrates. So, in other words, you may assume that is what Socrates, that Plato was, only replicating or conveying the message of the philosophical ideas of Socrates. However, that may be the case, that may not be the case. Regardless, what we learn from these dialogues are something very, 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 very important about ideas of Plato himself, not just Socrates but also Plato. Okay, so in this dialogue, in this Platonic dialogue between Meno and Socrates, the whole theme, the whole question about the central theme on which this dialogue is predicated is about the issue of virtue, right? Is the issue of virtue, and the whole question, right? The core theme of this Menno, of this dialogue, is that whether virtue can be taught, right? Whether is virtue teachable? Can you teach virtue to a person, or whether it comes by practice, right? Or can a person acquire virtue or become virtuous through practice, or is virtue acquired by birth, right? Is it by birth that you inherit the virtuousness of your parents? If your parents were virtuous, do you inherit that, or is it by nature, right? So we will go through it very quickly, the whole summary of Menno. But before we do that, I would like to again dwell a bit on the central theme of this dialogue. The central theme, the core theme, right? The question on which this dialogue is predicated, is based on, is on the question of virtue. Especially, can you teach virtue? Can virtue be taught? Can you teach virtue to a person? Can I teach you virtue? Or can you teach me virtue? Right? Is virtue teachable? Can a person teach another person how to be virtuous? That's the question, right? That's the question. And I'll give you the answer also about this, about the Menno, the conversation from Menno. Is that the whole conversation goes on with regards to, can you teach virtue? Is virtue teachable? Can it be taught? And the answer is that no, virtue cannot be taught. You cannot teach virtue. Now, it's up to you whether you believe in the answer, or the tentative answer of the preliminary, or the tentative answer given by Socrates, right? And the answer is that Plato, Socrates. And the answer is that no, you can't teach. You can't teach a person how to be virtuous. And then we will get to that. And if you have read the dialogue, if you've read it, it is very interesting. And if you have not, I would suggest that you read it. And I think it would be unfair that I've read it and I give you this lecture, and then you have not read it, and then you would have a difficult time trying to understand what the hell we are talking about, right? So it is better that you read it, right? And for those who have read it, it's very interesting, right? The thing is, Plato says, the thing is this, Menno, I'm sorry, but then I cannot teach you how to be virtuous. I cannot teach you virtue. Virtue cannot be taught, right? And not only that, not only is virtue not teachable, but also the question, the issue of virtue, right? The questions, the very question of the main theme, the core theme, the main question that revolves around this dialogue, the main question: what is virtue, or how can it be, or is it teachable? The questions are not fully. The question raised is not answered at all. Not only does Socrates says, no, I cannot teach you virtue, but he also says, we don't even have an idea about what virtue is, right? What virtue is. So how can we even, right now we can say, virtue is not teachable. However, that's incomplete, because we don't know what virtue is. We don't know the essence of virtue. If we don't know what it is, there's no point even saying or even talking about whether something is teachable or not. For instance, it is like this, right? If you don't know what vegetable is, if you don't know how to cut a vegetable, if you don't know what vegetables are, if you don't know anything about vegetables, then there's no point even talking about, can you teach me how to cook, right? It's pointless. I hope you're seeing the point. It is pointless to ask me, or it is pointless for me to ask you, teach me how to cook, when I don't even have an idea about what is cooking oil, what is vegetable, how do I cut them, how do I need salt? I don't even have an idea about the salt. I don't even have an idea about the oil and the spices that goes into the food. If I have no idea about those things, those basic essential things about cooking, then there's no point discussing whether cooking can be taught or not. And that is exactly what Meno, that is the limitations of Meno's question. Because he has no idea about what virtue is. What virtue is, Meno has no idea. However, he asks Socrates, right, is virtue teachable? Can it be taught? You see, it's like me asking you, I have no clue about vegetables or vegetable oil or salt or spices. However, can you tell me, can you teach me how to cook? And if you're smart enough, then you would tell me, hell no, no, I cannot teach you how to cook. If you don't have any ideas about these vegetables, about the basic concepts, about the essence of these things that goes into cooking, then there's no point even discussing. There's no point even coming to me and asking, teach me how to cook, or tell me if cooking is teachable. It makes absolutely no sense. And this goes back to the issue which we discussed, which we have discussed while we were talking of Socrates. You see, if you remember from the previous lectures, from the previous video lectures, and if you have not, I suggest that you go and re-watch the videos. Socrates really disliked, or he was aware of the fact that most people don't have an idea about what they are talking about. They have no idea about what they are talking about, but they act and they think as though they know a lot. They may have no idea about what virtue is, but they like to speak about virtue. And that is the point over here in Plato's Meno. Meno has no idea about virtue. He has no clue about what virtue is. What virtue is, Meno has no idea. However, he likes to think that he is virtuous, when in fact, in reality, he is not virtuous. When in fact, in reality, he has no idea about what virtue is. And instead of understanding and trying to acquire the knowledge of, not the knowledge, but acquire an understanding and knowing what virtue is, being a superficial person that Meno is, he goes to Socrates and asks him, Socrates, now tell me, answer me this question. Can you teach me how to be virtuous? Is virtue teachable? Can it be taught? Right? And if you have read the dialogue, later on Socrates tells him, no, hell no, right? I cannot teach you, virtue is not teachable. And don't worry, we'll go through this summary again, but he says, no, I cannot teach you how to be virtuous. Right? And he gives many varied examples, which are all very interesting. Right? Very interesting examples. So Socrates tells Meno that no, I cannot teach you how to be virtuous. It cannot be taught. Right? But moreover, not only can I not teach you how to be virtuous, but also both you and I have no idea, Socrates tells Meno, both you and I have no idea about what virtue is. Right? What virtue is. Not only can I not teach you how to be virtuous, or not only is virtue not teachable, but also we have no idea what virtue is. We have a very sporadic, very incomplete knowledge about what virtue is, but those are just very sporadic, very incomplete knowledge and incomplete ideas about virtue. Other than that, we have no clue, right? He says, even this question of you asking me, right, Socrates tells Meno, even this question of you asking me, is virtue teachable, is completely idiotic, right? I mean, obviously he doesn't say that, but indirectly he says that, but then, it's really irrelevant, it's kind of stupid. Why? Because there's no point asking me, is virtue teachable, when you don't even know what virtue is, right? It's like, how do I say it? Yeah, it's like I have no clue if I go up to, if I go up to a physicist, right? Say for instance, theoretical physicist, and ask him, Okay, is Einstein's special relativity teachable, right? Now, that scientist will tell me, are you stupid? Do you even have an idea about the basics of physics? And if I say no, then no, of course not, right? How can I, what kind of question is that? You don't even have an idea about the very basic ideas about physics, and here you are asking me about Einstein's special relativity, right? So much in the same way, Socrates, of course, we're talking about Plato, right? Plato's Socrates tells Meno that no, I cannot teach you how to be virtuous, nor can it be taught, but also we have missed the point. And Meno says, what did we miss the point? Well, the thing is, both you and I, we have no idea about what virtue is, right? What virtue is. Now, if you don't know what virtue is, there's no point even talking about can it be taught. Okay, so here we are done with the introduction, and in the next video lecture, we will go through the summary of, we will very quickly go through the summary of Menno, and then we will go more in depth into the explanation of things. Alright? Okay, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.